Let's start today's episode with a moment most people listening will recognise. You're training, you're not doing anything reckless, no ego lifting, just moving. And then something tweaks. It's not a dramatic injury, nothing snaps, nothing drops you to the floor, but you feel it. A twinge in your back, a sharp pull in your hamstring, a weird shoulder sensation you've never noticed before. And then in that moment, everything changes. Suddenly you're thinking, should I stop? Is this serious? Have I broken something? Am I going to make this worse? And if you've been injured before, there's often another layer. Here we go again. That moment, that tiny tweak is where fear creeps in. Not pain, fear. Fear of training, fear of loading, fear of certain exercises, and fear of doing the wrong thing. And this episode exists to change how you understand that moment. So as always, grab that cuppa or pop on those trainers and we'll get straight into it. A lot of people think injury prevention means avoiding exercises or being fragile or wrapping themselves in cotton wool, never pushing, never progressing. But that mindset doesn't prevent injuries, it just slowly shrinks your confidence. And over time, it stops you training altogether. And the truth is that most injuries aren't caused by one bad movement. They're caused by how we train over time. And that means injury prevention isn't about fear, it's about strategy. And here's the belief I hear all the time. I must be injury prone. People say it like it's a personality trait, like it's just who they are. But injury prone isn't a thing. What is real is poor load management and sudden spikes in training volume, fatigue masking form breakdown, doing too much too fast, under-recovering or under-fueling. In other words, the system failed, not the body. Your body is actually incredibly resilient and it adapts what you expose it to, good or bad. And a lot of injury prevention advice sounds like, don't do that exercise, you should never lift heavy, squats are bad for your knees, deadlifts ruin your back. And honestly, that advice causes more harm than good, because it teaches people to fear movement instead of understanding it. The goal isn't to avoid load, the goal is to apply load intelligently. This is one of the most important ideas in this entire episode. You can train in a way that makes you fragile, nervous, overprotective, or scared to progress. Or you can train in a way that makes you robust, confident, adaptable, and resilient. Robust bodies aren't built by avoiding stress. They're built by exposing tissue to manageable stress over time. That's how tendons strengthen and joints tolerate load, and your muscles protect structures, and then your confidence grows. Injury prevention is not about doing less forever, it's about doing the right amount in the right way. If you've listened to the last few episodes, you'll probably already see the pattern. Episode 21 was progressive overload, how bodies adapt. Episode 22 was training volume and how much stress you can tolerate. Episode 23 was exercise selection, how effectively that stress is applied. And injury prevention lives at the intersection of all three. Most injuries don't come from bad exercises or bad people. They come from too much volume or progression too quickly or using exercises that don't suit the body or while recovery is already compromised. That's not weakness, that's physics and physiology. So I want to say this clearly before we continue. Feeling something doesn't automatically mean you're injured. Bodies give feedback all the time. Sensations change as load changes. That doesn't mean damage. Learning the difference between discomfort, fatigue, stiffness, and injury. This is a huge part of long-term training success, and that's what we're building toward in this episode. In the rest of this episode, we're going to talk about why most injuries are actually load management issues, why perfect form isn't the magic solution people think it is, and how fatigue quietly increases injury risk, how to train around those niggles instead of stopping, and how to build a body that stays capable for decades, not just weeks, not just a transformation photo, for life. One of the biggest mindset shifts I want to create in this episode is this. Most injuries are not caused by one bad exercise. They're caused by how load is applied over time. And this is really important because people believe injuries are caused by specific movements. They start avoiding those movements altogether. And avoidance doesn't build safety, it builds fragility. You've probably heard things like squats ruin your knees, deadlifts destroy your back, running is bad for your joints, overhead pressing will wreck your shoulders. But here's the truth. There is no inherently dangerous exercise, only poor managed load. Squats don't damage knees, deadlifts don't ruin backs, and running doesn't destroy joints. What does cause problems is doing too much too soon, progressing load faster than tissue can adapt, and training hard while already fatigued, ignoring recovery and nutrition, and repeating the same stress without variation. Most injuries are not sudden. They're usually the end result of cumulative fatigue or repeated overload without recovery, subtle compensations, and small warning signs that get ignored. Think of it like filling a bucket with water. Each training session adds a little bit. Each poor night's sleep adds a little bit more. Each stressful week adds a little more. And each underfueled day adds a little bit more. Eventually, the bucket overflows. The injury didn't come out of nowhere. It was building quietly. Fatigue changes everything. When you're fatigued, your coordination drops and your reaction time slows. Your joint positioning deteriorates and your muscles don't stabilize as well. Your technique breaks down. This is why injuries often happen at the end of sessions or towards the end of training blocks or during stressful life periods. Not because form suddenly became terrible, but because fatigue reduced your margin for error. See, form matters and technique matters. But perfect form is not a magical shield against injury. You can have great technique and solid movement patterns and good coaching and still get injured if load is poorly managed. Because tissue doesn't care how pretty the movement looked. They care about how much stress they're exposed to and how often. And this is why people get injured during exercises they've always done, and athletes get injured in movements they're highly skilled at. Load still matters. See, here's a really important distinction. A fragile approach is training that looks like avoiding movements and being scared of load, constantly protecting your joints, never progressing. A robust approach looks like gradually exposing tissues to stress, building tolerance over time, and strengthening around the vulnerable areas, progressing patiently. Robustness comes from appropriate exposure, not avoidance. Your body learns what it is capable of tolerating by being challenged, not for being shielded from stress forever. People often try to injury-proof themselves by constantly changing exercises, but novelty doesn't automatically reduce injury risk. In fact, too much novelty can prevent tissues from adapting and increase unfamiliar stress and reduce movement confidence. Consistency with intelligent progression allows tissues to adapt and strengthen. The problem isn't repeating movements. The problem is repeating them without managing the load. If you've been injured before or you feel like your body is temperamental, hear this. Your body isn't broken. It's responding exactly as biology predicts. And with better load management, better recovery, and better progression, most people can train pain-free and confidently, even with past injuries. So now that you understand injuries are rarely random, exercises aren't the enemy, and load and fatigue aren't the real drivers, the next piece is learning how to spot risk early before something becomes a full injury. And that's what we're going to cover next. One of the hardest parts of training long-term isn't the lifting. It's knowing how to interpret the signals your body gives you without spiraling into fear, avoidance, or I should just stop doing everything. Because bodies talk to us constantly, the skill is learning what they're actually saying. First, not every sensation is an injury. And this is crucial. A lot of people jump straight from, that feels different, to, I've injured myself. But sensations exist on a spectrum. There is a huge difference between normal training discomfort, stiffness, fatigue, adaptation, and injury. If you treat every sensation like a red alert, you'll end up training scared. And fear is a terrible training partner. So let's break this down simply. Normal training feedback can include muscle soreness and stiffness after rest, tightness that eases as you warm up, fatigue during a session, a mild awareness of an area. These are usually signs of adaptation, increased load, unfamiliar stress, and they are not dangerous. Some warning signs that deserve attention, not necessarily panic. Pain that sharpens instead of easing, pain that changes your movement, pain that worsens across sessions, loss of strength or control, swelling or heat, pain that lingers and doesn't settle. These don't mean stop forever. They mean adjust. So what people mean by niggles? Niggles are those low-level annoyances like a tight hip or a grumpy knee or an achy shoulder or a stiff lower back. They're common, especially in people who train consistently. Niggles don't mean you're broken. They mean something in the system needs attention. Often that something is volume, fatigue, recovery, or movement balance. Why panic makes things worse? When people panic, they often stop moving altogether or avoid loading that area. They tense up, they lose confidence. And ironically, this can increase sensitivity and reduce tolerance and make return to training harder. The body likes graduated exposure, not sudden withdrawal. So instead of thinking, do I stop or do I push through? Ask yourself, how can I turn the dial? You can turn the dial by reducing the load or reducing volume or adjusting the range of motion, changing tempo or choosing a different exercise or increasing your rest. You rarely need to turn the dial to zero. So how do we train around the niggles and not through them? And this is a long-term skill. Training around this means that you keep moving, you keep strength, you maintain your confidence, while avoiding provoking the pain and reinforcing poor patterns. As an example, if your shoulder feels grumpy, you might reduce overhead volume, focus on rows and controlled presses, adjust grip or range, and slow the tempo. Movement continues, just intelligently modified. And this is why complete rest is rarely the answer. Total rest has a place, but it's often overused. Prolonged rest can reduce tissue tolerance and increase your fear and make further return harder. Most tissues respond better to appropriate loading, circulation, and controlled movement. Again, adjustment beats avoidance. Now, confidence is protective. People who trust their bodies move more naturally, adapt quicker, and return from setbacks faster. This doesn't come from never feeling discomfort. It comes from understanding what sensations mean and knowing how to respond, and having a plan. Here's something I say to clients a lot. Pain does not equal damage, and lack of pain does not equal safety. Context matters. Your job isn't to eliminate sensation, it's to interpret it intelligently. So now that you know that not every sensation is a threat and how to recognize early warning signs and how to adjust without panicking, the next step is learning how to actually build resilience to your training so your body becomes more tolerant over time, not more fragile. And that's what we're going to cover in the next section. So let's talk about the end goal of all of this, because injury prevention isn't really about avoiding injury. It's about building a body that can tolerate load and adapt to stress, recover from setbacks, and keep going year after year. That's what robustness is. Some people believe they're just built different, but robustness isn't luck, it's exposure. Tissues become resilient when they are loaded, rested, reloaded, and progressively challenged. This is how muscles strengthen, tendons stiffen and adapt, joints tolerate force, bones become denser, and avoiding stress doesn't protect tissues, it makes them less prepared for it. Why being careful can backfire. And this is subtle but important. People who've been injured often become overly cautious, afraid to load, hesitant to progress, and stuck doing the same safe exercises forever. The intention is good, but the outcome often isn't. Because if tissues are never challenged, Tolerance doesn't increase, confidence drops, fear grows, and everyday life stresses start to feel threatening. Long-term safety comes from capacity, not avoidance. Strength is one of the most protective qualities you can build. Stronger muscles absorb more force, they stabilize your joints better, and they reduce strain on passive structures. This is why strong knees cope better with running, and strong backs cope better with lifting, and strong shoulders cope better with overhead work. You don't protect joints by avoiding load, you protect them by teaching muscles to manage it. Robust training includes variation, but not chaos. Good variations mean training tissues through different ranges and exposing them to different but related stresses and slightly changing stimuli over time. Bad variation looks like random workouts, no progression, constant new exercises, no adaptation windows. Your body needs repetition to adapt, but not so much that it becomes brittle. Even in injury prevention, progressive overload matters, but it doesn't always look like adding weight every week. Sometimes it looks like smoother reps, better control, longer ranges, improved tolerance, and less fear. Progression isn't always heavier. Sometimes it's more capable. Recovery is not a luxury. You don't build resilience by constantly pushing through exhaustion. Recovery allows tissue repair and nervous system regulation and adaptation to occur. Poor recovery increases sensitivity, reduces coordination, and raises injury risk. Sleep, nutrition, rest days, and stress management are part of the injury prevention, not extras. Here's something powerful for you. When people feel strong and capable, they move better, load better, react faster, and adapt quicker. Confidence improves mechanics, and good mechanics reduce injury risk. This is why fear-based training is so damaging. It undermines the very thing that keeps people safe. See, perfect training doesn't exist. Long-term training is messy. Life interferes. Bodies fluctuate. Robust people don't avoid setbacks. They recover from them quickly. That's the real goal. See, now that we understand how injuries actually happen and how to interpret warning signs and how to build resilience over time, the final piece is learning how to train for the long term without burning out, breaking down, or becoming fearful of movement. And that's what we'll close this episode with. Let's finish this episode with some clarity, because long-term training isn't about being perfect. It's about being consistent, adaptable, and confident over time. These aren't rules to make training restrictive. They're principles that keep people training for life. So 1, train for capacity, not just aesthetics. Looking good is great, but looking good while still being able to move, lift, run, and live is better. Training that builds strength, coordination, tolerance, and confidence creates a body that lasts. When capacity increases, everyday life feels easier, and that alone reduces injury risk. 2, load should rise slower than your ego wants. And most injuries happen during rapid progress, excitement phases, or I feel amazing weeks. That's when people jump too far, too fast. Your tissues adapt slower than motivation. Slow progress isn't boring, it's protective. 3, consistency beats intensity. You don't need heroic sessions. You need repeatable training, predictable recovery, and consistency over months and years. The best injury prevention strategy is not doing one perfect session. It's doing enough sessions safely over time. 4, adjust early, not dramatically. The best trainers don't panic when something feels off. They adjust volume, change range, modify tempo, swap exercises. Early, calm adjustments prevent forced stops later. Small changes now save big setbacks later. 5, stop treating discomfort as failure. Discomfort does not mean damage, weakness, or that you're doing it wrong. Bodies respond to stress, sensations, change. That's normal. Your goal isn't to eliminate sensation, it's to respond intelligently. 6, recovery is part of training. Recovery isn't passive, it's active adaptation. Sleep, nutrition, rest days, and stress management aren't optional extras. They're what's allowed your training to work. You can't out-train poor recovery. 7, strong, confident movers get injured less. This is a big one. People who trust their bodies move more naturally, brace better, react faster, and adapt quicker. Fear increases stiffness. Confidence increases resilience. Your mindset matters. And the big picture is that injury prevention isn't about never getting injured. It's about reducing unnecessary risk, recognizing warning signs early and responding intelligently, and bouncing back faster when setbacks happen. Long-term training is not fragile, it's forgiving if you train smart. If you take one thing away from today, let it be this. Your body is not fragile. It adapts to what you teach it. Train it with patience, load it intelligently, and listen without fear, and it will serve you far longer than you think. Next week, we're finishing the foundations block with episode 25, Why Eating Less Stops Working for Fat Loss and Muscle Gain. This episode is for anyone who's constantly tired, stuck despite doing everything right, and underfueling without even realizing it. It's the missing piece that explains why progression stalls, even with good training. As always, thank you for listening, thank you for trusting me with your time, and thank you for choosing to train in a way that builds confidence, resilience, and longevity, not fear. If this podcast resonated with you, feel free to send it to a friend, family member, or training buddy who could benefit from the info. I will see you in the next episode.